Okay, listen. I wrote the intro for this month myself. Since every November you insist on recording an intro that's like a 3-act play revolving around whatever movie trailer is out at the time. So I just can't have you work on it. I'm going to perform it myself. I just wanted you to know that I'm going to do this.
Darth Vader's back in this one.
We're all excited about Rogue One, but we have a job to do.
So did that ragtag band of rebels who stole the plans for the Death Star, I assume.
I'm not doing this.
That's what Jyn Erso said, but she had to because of her dad or something, I think.
I'm going to count from Rogue One to Rogue 10. And if you don't stop talking about Star Wars, I'm taking that trailer away. Rogue 1.
But...
Rogue 2.
Is there a trailer for that one yet?
Rogue 3.
No!
Rogue 4.
What are you doing?
Give me that.
My intangible object!
You'll get this back when you learn how to be a professional podcaster.
Who knows when that'll be?
Now think about what you did. I'll be at church.
He's going to church without me? I don't get to do anything fun. Just because I have what my doctor diagnosed me with as a healthy obsession with movie trailers doesn't mean I should be locked in this cupboard under the stairs. Coming to theaters whenever I learn how to be a professional pod racer. Not pod racer, podcaster. I'll never get it. Mr. Owl, how many licks does it take to get to the center of my soul? Mr. Owl, I'm talking to you. You snowy white devil, you don't know anything.
He's not that kind of owl.
Who said that?
Why, I did.
Eddie Redmayne?
No, we couldn't afford him. I'm Nicholas Hoult.
What are you doing here in my cupboard?
Didn't you get my letters?
Didn't you get my letters? I loved you in the Mad Max trailer.
You mean to tell me all those letters I sent you never arrived?
I don't have a mailbox. I live off the grid, in the quarry.
Well, not anymore, my boy. There's a wonderful place for people like you.
People like me, who have, again, what my doctor assures me is a healthy obsession with movie trailers?
Yes, you're a loser, Daniel.
I knew it! My middle school bully Matt Zombo was right.
To help you on your journey, read this book I wrote.
Fantastic trailers and where to find them.
Now join me.
My brick wall!
Don't worry about that. It is now open to a whole paradise of movie trailers and a ghetto of teasers. Behold.
Wow, a broom!
Well, come on, it's not just a broom. I mean, look, it flies.
Yeah. Whoa, a train pulling into a normally numbered platform.
Actually, it's a very unusual number, you see. It's 9 3/4.
Huh. That doesn't sound practical.
And there she is up on the hill. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Trailer Editing. The most lucrative form of witchcraft.
Ugh, must be a public school.
Could you, at least pretend to be excited about this? I broke a wall for you. I showed you an owl.
That snowy white devil! The only owls I want to see are in the trailer for Legend of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole.
Give me the book. I'm done here. Good luck getting home.
Coming this fall, Why Does Everyone Leave Me? Starring one sad boy, me. Rated PG for please, Greg, bring me home.
Hi!
Greg!
So I was curious and I watched the Rogue One trailer and I hate to say this, you were right. It was downright bitchin'.
I knew it!
So, should I use the TIE fighters to blow up Hogwarts?
Yeah!
Now let's blow this thing and go home! You like that?
Yeah! Now how do we get home?
We have to click our ruby red lightsabers together and repeat after me. There's no place like Hoth. 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 There's no place like Hoth.
There's no place like Hoth.
Daniel! Daniel, wake up! Daniel! Daniel! Daniel!
What?
I took your trailer away and you passed out in anger.
I had the queerest dream.
Strange. Just say strange.
I dreamt that I was in this crappy world, and you were there, Greg. And so were you, Broom. And you too, Train. And so were you, Uncle TIE Fighter. And you too, Nicholas Hoult.
It's Holt.
But it had to be Hoult. It had to work for the owl joke. And you were there too, Darth Vader. And you, Harry Potter. And you, Salacious Crumb. And Nagini.
He's not gonna stop. Just play the theme.
And R2-D2. And R2-D5. And R4-D4. The Weasley twin that survived. BB-8. And the entire upper management team of Gringotts. And you... I don't know who you are.
I'm Phil Collins, not that one. I'm the copyright lawyer for popular culture. You've been served. Hey!
Coming at you live from midnight in the Garden of
Evil and Evil.
Evil Knievel.
The Garden of Evil Knievel.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to episode 35 of LA Meekly, everyone's favorite podcast.
Featuring you and me. If you don't
Special
listen to...
guest Dupree coming up.
What's the one about the dog? What's it called?
Marley and me.
Yeah, Marley and
you,
me.
You, me, Dupree, Marley and me.
Oh, God. No one likes this.
No, I still wonder. So, hello, Greg.
Hello, Daniel. Welcome back.
Welcome.
How have you been? I don't care.
I think he might be sad that we don't get to talk for longer about oranges than we're about to.
I just... turn it off.
Oh, he's allergic to oranges. That's what it was. This is like The Godfather. He tried making me laugh with his scary orange mouth, but he had a heart attack.
Which was less scary somehow.
The kid still sprayed him with the water gun. Even he thought he was overacting. You come to me on the day of my father's death and spray him with a water gun. As you might have guessed, it's November. Thanks
for making it November.
Thanks for the giving reason. Halloween is over. We hope you all got scary. We hope you didn't get some sort of the others situation.
Yeah, that's not great. I hope you didn't have to suffer through a Devil's Night or anything weird. If we have any listeners in Detroit.
Halloween's over. Yep. I hope that you didn't get any razor blades.
Nobody wants that.
No, except from Harry's, our new sponsor.
You'll find a razor blade in everyone from more candy.
Harry's Razor Blade presents Halloween. Everything you grew up being afraid of, brought to you by Harry's Razors.
Mom, there's a razor in my Snickers. Oh, lucky!
Did you subscribe? The first one's free. Just use promo code ER. It is now the month of turkeys, parades, Al Roker wearing a sweater.
Gravy.
The rest is such.
I would hope so. It all falls in line, fall.
Fall.
Oh no, the fall of the Roman
Empire. The quickest
Empire.
line between fall and Christmas is Thanksgiving.
You heard it, friend. What are you thankful for?
Witty banter, charm.
I wish that made appearance every once in a while. Those are my New Year's resolutions. Witty banter, charm.
And world wars.
I'm tired of numbering world wars. Let's just...
World War next.
Yeah, exactly.
World War again. World War II.
Best World War.
TOO. World War also. So since it's November and Thanksgiving is coming, we always try to talk about something, pilgrim related, that sort of thing. We're going to talk about the bounty of our very own city.
Beautiful.
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
She loves me. Her bounty. She feeds me with it.
She's bountiful. She's well endowed.
The city. Vavavoom. Yeah, we're going to be talking about...
Oranges. The gold of... Well, the second gold of California.
Yeah. Orange gold.
Next to real gold, it's the other gold,
Out of gold, white gold, black gold, and orange gold, this looks the most like regular gold.
Yeah.
And it's orange.
It looks more like gold than Texas tea is gold.
It was a big part, obviously. Everyone grows up hearing about oranges. Make sure to brush your teeth at night, the oranges will bite.
It's odd to me that whenever I brought up the episode to people, they were like, isn't that a Florida thing? I'm like, not really. It's not.
Well, kind of, but...
In my head, it was always a Southern California thing, and I'm hoping that you're going to introduce the idea that it was a Los Angeles thing, because through my research, I'm like, well, it's mostly Southern California.
Back to what you were talking about, telling people about we're doing an orange episode. Yeah. We've been joking about doing an episode about oranges as a joke.
Yeah.
And here we are.
I can't believe, it's going to be boring, right, if we ever did that? Well, here we are. So.
And surprise, surprise. This is one of those ones where we try to keep it very Los Angeles, like strictly within the borders.
Yeah, but then there was no borders at the time.
Yeah. It was everywhere. Like it was, Los Angeles is such a big part of it, but so was the rest of California.
Exactly, yeah. We might as well be Corona, California. You know what I mean? Colton.
Great, you don't mean that.
We might as well be Hemet.
You're going to call us ZZXYZ or whatever?
Zizix? Yeah, we might as well be Zizix Road.
Well, am I going to pack up and move to Weed? Am I going to set up shop in Eureka? Come on. I don't have the constitution to live in Humboldt. I'll start at the beginning, of course, as I do, as every great raconteur does. That's what I call myself now. Raconteur. I like the sound of that.
That's good. Can you change your last name to Raconteur?
Hey, Johnny Raconteur, you know that new raconteur you're raconteuring about? Well, raconteur on this.
I've heard that already.
No, it's mine. Oranges.
God damn it.
Orange, you glad I don't have an opening line for this one? Oranges and citrus in general is not indigenous to the Americas. Get that through your head.
I gotta get it out.
The first citrus to be brought here came with Christopher Columbus on his second voyage across the ocean blue in 1493.
Can I boo him, but yay oranges?
You can boo the Nina and the Pinta.
But what about Santa Maria?
My God, if you say one bad thing about Santa Maria.
Santa Maria!
Ha, yeah, Santa Maria. 1493, Columbus's second voyage voyage. Not long after that, it was required as part of the new homemaking of the colonizers for all Spanish sailors heading into the New World to take 100 citrus seeds with them. Like, you better make room.
I count 94 here. Oh, we got hungry. We got scurvy.
They're just seeds, Manuel.
Seeds.
Oranges were very important to the Spanish. So, of course, when the first mission in San Diego was founded in 1769, they brought some orange trees with them, making them the first orange trees in California. 1769. Apparently, orange seeds are very heavy because it took them all the way until 1804 to travel all the way north to our very own Mission San Gabriel for the first orange trees to be planted in what is now Los Angeles. So that's 1804.
Wow.
It didn't exist. It's so weird to think, like,
Yeah, we didn't have that.
we created a new environment.
I hope you can grow here, because if you can't, wasted our time.
We're going back to Spain. Good.
Sayonara. Which you don't even know yet. You haven't even conquered that yet.
Sayonara, which you'll learn if you keep going east. So these seeds were most likely taken from those original trees in San Diego, the ones they brought to San Gabriel. But down south, it was just a few scattered trees that they had in San Diego. There wasn't much native growing produce here, so they wanted to plant a ton of stuff. So what we had here in San Gabriel was the first full-blown orange orchard in California. So this consisted of about 400 orange trees spread out over 6 acres of land. Now, the types of oranges that were growing at this time are believed to have originally come from southeast China thousands of years ago. They were sweet and thin-skinned, but they were filled with seeds. So many seeds.
Yeah, like mostly seeds. It's like skin and seeds.
That's my favorite Stephen King novel. They were sweet, thin-skinned, filled with seeds, much like the very fertile hosts of this podcast. But they were oranges nonetheless, just like us, and they were the nicest thing you could eat in the city at the time, I would assume. You can either have oranges or like a dirty donkey.
Yeah, you can kill a mule and eat it. Not the nice one, because the kings. Wish we had kings back then.
King Donkey.
King Donkey.
Oh, they're just like parfaits. They're just like them. I get it. So the San Gabriel mission had a monopoly on the oranges until 1834, when the missions became secularized, and the most secular man in town, our old wine pioneering friend, Jean-Louis Vigne, he bought 35 orange trees from the mission and moved them to his land in what is now downtown LA, creating only the second orange orchard in California. So the first two were both in LA.
Okay.
Find out more about that drunk in our alcohol episode. Candy is dandy, but liquor is click here. Vigne leaned more towards winemaking, but now it's time to give a side character from that episode his moment in the orange sun. William Wolfskill. I told you he'd be back.
You did.
He was born March 20th, 1798 in Boonesboro, Kentucky, and was the oldest of 12 siblings. Conveniently enough, for the name of that town, his parents' neighbor was Daniel Boone. So he grew up next door to Daniel
Weird.
Boone. Yeah.
Remember the Alamo, but it hasn't happened yet.
Remember the Alamo and to bring in your trash cans.
Mostly the second part.
When William was 11, the ever-obsessed Daniel Boone Wolfskill clan moved to Boone's Lick, Missouri, where little Willie learned the skills of a frontiersman. In the early 1820s, Wolfskill became friends with a trapper named Ewing Young in Taos, New Mexico, who convinced him in 1822 to move to Santa Fe, where the two worked trapping beavers and herding cattle and occasionally running moonshine.
Beavers.
During this time, little Wolfie heard stories from the frontiersman Jedediah Smith about the beauty of this new place called California. Smith had been the first American to travel from the east to California by land, without having to eat all of his friends along the way. He told him about how much fur trapping there was to be done there and how much money was to be made. The problem was Mexico now owned California, and to trap legally in California, you had to be a Mexican citizen. So Wolfskill did just that, and he changed his name to Jose Guillermo Wolfskill. And now he's Mexican.
That's all it took.
Now the next huge problem he had to face was how to get there.
To California?
Yeah.
I thought he worked that out.
He just worked out his name. He got all of his costume ready.
Well, I'm in a mariachi band now, I suppose.
Can I hitch a ride with Lucy and Ethel? The Grand Canyon was in his way, and he couldn't go south because there were hostile tribes of humans down there who had given a lot of trouble to the pobladors coming from Mexico a few decades earlier. So he gathered up some 20 men, and in 1831 he left Santa Fe, went through Colorado and Utah to avoid the Grand Canyon, and from there through the Mojave Desert to the San Bernardino Mountains through what is now Cajon Pass, and finally arriving at the San Gabriel Mission. So this was a brand new route that Wolfskill blazed that is now known as the Old Spanish Trail and was made one of the U.S.'s National Historic Trails.
Wow.
Yeah, so in February 1831, Wolfskill and his men arrive at San Gabriel and are greeted warmly, but where there was no warmth was between Wolfskill and his men, because along the way, Wolfskill had gotten them lost and snowed in, and they had to be forced to eat their horses and mules.
Wow.
Get ready for Los Angeles cuisine.
I hope you like horses and mule. Not really.
I liked one, but not like that. That sort of thing. Apparently, that'll sour a relationship. So when they got to LA, they all left him alone and in a ton of debt. And he needed cash, so he took some odd jobs to make money, such as supposedly he led a massacre of Shoshone horse thieves in Black Star Canyon in what is now Orange County.
Great.
But that story is not confirmed because it kind of goes against Wolfskill's personality of being actually pretty accepting and tolerant. For being one of the first American settlers in California, he was pretty accepting of, other people.
Yeah.
And also, he was known for never taking advantage of the natives and the Mexicans once the U.S.
Nice.
took over.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help his case that in 1836, he did lead a lynch mob to kill 2 murderers that he felt the Mexican government was taking too long to convict.
Justice is a hard thing.
Where the wolves don't kill, the wolves kill.
With a wolf skill.
But he decided to earn money the way he knew best. So in 1832, he built the Refugio, which was the first schooner in Los Angeles, which is a type of boat. And he used it to hunt sea otters in San Pedro Bay. Unfortunately, there weren't any sea otters in San Pedro Bay, so he sold his schooner.
You'd think he'd do the research on that first.
Yeah, he changed his name. He changed his name to Sea Otter Wolfskill. He thought he could blend in.
You gotta change your name to an international waters name.
Underage activity Wolfskill. Within a year, he sold the boat and he eventually decides to get into farming. In 1838, he was given 100 acres of land by the Mexican government between 3rd and 9th in San Pedro and Alameda, with his adobe being at 239 Alameda, which would today be between 3rd and 4th. This was right next door to Viñas, and Wolfskill decided to honor thy neighbor by copying thy neighbor and started growing grapes, just like Viña was. As we discussed in our alcohol episode, he gave Viña a run for his money for a while, but his heart wasn't fully in grapes. It was in something else.
What would it be?
Something orange.
Grapefruit.
It was an orange.
Oh, like the color and the fruit.
Oranges are yellow. I mean, grapefruits are yellow. I mean, yellows are lemon. I Wolfskilled that joke. So in 1841, Wolfskill got some seedlings of the sweet Spanish oranges from the San Gabriel Mission and planted 2 acres worth of them at what is now 5th and Alameda. It smells much different there now. It was a big year for Wolfskill because in January of 1841 as well, he married into a very influential Mexican family by hitching up with Magdalena Lugo, daughter of Don Jose Ignacio Lugo of Santa Barbara. And in doing this, he gained a lot of esteem and stature in the community. As a side note, they also had 6 kids together who Wolfskill decided to give educations to personally out of his house, which turned into a kind of private school, not only for his own kids, but for some other local kids as well, which is why he's considered to have started the first American school in California.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was just him ranting about oranges and killing natives.
You don't know you've lost it till you've eaten your own mule.
Have we graduated?
Can I go home? Is this going to be on the test?
Oh, life is a test. So yes, and it's Scantron. Now, what type of orange exactly was being grown on Wolfskill's land is the subject of 2 completely conflicting and conveniently confusing theories. So there's one camp that believes that Wolfskill took the mission seedlings and some other strands of orange he managed to get his hands on and created a hybrid that he named after a town in Spain, Valencia. Valencia oranges. Valencia, Spain was known for its sweet oranges that they originally got from either India or China, depending on what story you want to go with. So there's like alternate stories within this alternate stories. Then there's the second group that believes Valencias came from the Azores Islands in Portugal and were brought to England in 1865 by a man named Thomas Rivers, where they were renamed Excelsiors before they were brought to Florida in 1872, where they were called Hearts Tardif.
I'd hate to call it something fun like Excelsior. You're right. Call it Hearts
You ever had a Hearts Tardif?
Hearts Tardif.
So then from there, they were brought by a man named Albert B. Chaplin to San Gabriel, where he renamed them Rive Late, and then La Naranja Tarde de Valencia after one of his employees, and then simply Valencias. People from the dreaded Orange County claim that the Valencia was popularized by Charles C. Chapman of Chapman University, but there are so many different variations on these 2 versions of where the Valencia came from, it almost isn't even worth bothering trying to figure it out because I couldn't. What's important is that somehow, some way, Wolfskill's ungodly experimentation or Orange County black magic, the Valencia orange became popular. So that's what you have to know.
Yeah.
It had a much richer flavor than the other oranges that were around, with other kinds that had names like Malta Blood, Mediterranean Sweet, and Paper Rind St. Michael.
Yeah, I think these guys were not admin.
The Valencias only had between 0 to 7 seeds in them, so it wasn't, it wasn't like biting into a ball of teeth or something. They grew from March to September. They still do. They haven't changed. Even though today Valencias are mostly used for juice, they were so superior to the oranges we had before that they quickly established dominance in LA and all of California. So like that was our orange for a while. They're also the namesake of Valencia Santa Clarita, my favorite place in Los Angeles.
I mean, when I'm on vacation here in California, I always go to Valencia.
You gotta go there. You gotta go to the Elephant Bar. You gotta go. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel. So back to Wolfskill's Grove. This was a time in Los Angeles when people didn't know what was going to take hold as the city's cash crop.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird to think, like, people were they tried bananas, they tried pineapples, they tried mangoes and coconuts, but it was too dry to grow any of these things. People also tried to discourage Wolfskill by telling him that oranges would never be popular in LA because so few people lived down there that he wouldn't have anyone to sell it to.
I mean, if your horse wants to buy one, it's fine.
No, I ate him. They said, no, yeah, it'll never work, you crazy young man.
Yeah.
And then the gold rush happened, and craggly old minor 49ers were getting scurvy left and right. A good way to prevent scurvy is by eating citrus. Orange is a citrus. Oh, the killer was Jack Ruby. Wolfskill saw the potential of being able to sell his oranges up north, so he loaded up a ship and sent it to San Francisco. And in doing so, he became the first person to run an orange grove for commercial purposes and started the citrus industry. That was the beginning. His product was so popular that he was able to sell oranges to those smelly old scurvy boys for up to $1 each, which in today's dollars, that's like $30 for an orange.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's better than the hospital.
Come on.
Oranja care.
What are they? What is this, gas prices?
Was this traffic? This got Wolfskill off and running, and he was able to expand his grove. Soon, Wolfskill had 100 acres of land that he also grew grapes and walnuts on, but 70 of those were for oranges, holding some 2,500 trees, making this the largest orange grove in North America.
It's crazy.
In 1859, he won the prize for best oranges at the state fair. A proud day. In 1862, California had 25,000 orange trees, and Wolfskill owned 2/3 of those.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He carved his name in every single one. By 1864, he was the second highest taxpayer in LA County. When he died on October 3rd, 1866, he owned 3/4 of all of California's citrus trees. And he's buried at the Calvary Cemetery in East LA and is not only considered the father of the orange business, but next to Vigna, one of the pioneers of secular citrus in general. Big secular citrus. A side note worth mentioning about Wolfskill involves a different sort of tree. In 1865, Wolfskill decided he wanted a nicer place to live than orange smelly downtown, so he bought Rancho Santa Anita near what is now the racetrack from a guy named Hugo Reed. I wrote down Huge Reed.
That's actually not huge at all. He's pretty small.
It was an ironic nickname they gave him. Wolfskill got a wild idea to start planting these trees he had heard about from Australia called eucalyptus and then try selling their lumber. So he managed to get some seedlings and planted 5 outside of his new home at Santa Anita. These were the first eucalyptus trees planted in California, and while the lumber business never took off, he found that they made good windshields for the orange groves, so it started becoming common practice to surround orange groves with eucalyptus trees, which is why there's so many eucalyptus trees in LA.
That's crazy.
It's really, that was very shocking to find out. The trend was also helped out in the 1880s when friend of the show, Abbott Kinney, became state forester from 1886 to 88, and he started giving out tons of free eucalyptus seeds to help, for whatever reason, plant these. The orange business kept growing, but in the 1870s, it really took off for 2 reasons. The first was that this was the decade when the Transcontinental Railroad was finished. In 1876, Southern Pacific reached LA, and now he had a direct line to the East Coast. At this point, the Wolfskill we all knew and I guess kind of loved was dead, but his son Joseph Wolfskill had some of the same foresight as Papa Wolf. So in 1877, Joseph sent out the first shipment of oranges out of California on a boxcar straight to St. Louis. And by straight to St. Louis, I mean it took a month to get there. Each orange was individually wrapped in paper, which soon became standard practice, and put into a divided wooden box. To keep them fresh, they were covered in a lot of ice that had to be replaced 11 times along the way, and they showed up in St. Louis still pretty fresh. So this opened up a whole new market for the California orange growers, and the Easterners liked what they were getting. Give me more.
Daddy likes this.
I
Give
want
some to Daddy.
We don't have cocaine yet. We want more oranges. The East Coasters, they had their precious Florida alligator balls. That's what they call oranges.
No class.
No, they have no class. There was a difference in the oranges that were coming from California, from Los Angeles and California. The racism creating humidity of Florida allowed for more pounds of oranges to be created per acre, but those oranges became mostly used for juice because they were ugly.
Bottom of the crate.
Juice them. The LA and California oranges could be sold at the market because our climate at the time promoted really beautiful orange skin.
Are you talking about food, right?
What do you mean?
What are you implying?
There was the big trend back then, orange skin. Also, the LA temperature caused more sugar to accumulate and acid to form inside of the oranges, which makes for a better tasting fruit.
Yeah.
There's so many more factors than I ever imagined in oranges.
Just that sentence is bizarre to me, but I'm just going to go with it.
And here's also
the air made the sugar better. What?
Haven't you read my conspiracy blog that the government's been pumping sugar into the air over Los Angeles? It's not smog, people. It's not smog, it's licorice.
If you paint this wall yellow, it's going to make candy taste better. Oh, okay.
Taste the wall. It tastes like snozzberries. and it wasn't built that way. So our oranges also had more of that white stuff between the rind and the actual fruit, which allows them to last longer when they're being shipped.
Okay.
Remember at this time that most Americans hadn't even seen an orange before.
That's an odd concept
I know,
to me.
it's so weird. I remember my grandma said that when she first came to America, the first thing was someone was like selling bananas straight off the boat. Like they were selling bananas. She's like, what is a banana?
I like saying it, but what is it?
Oh, my grandma's a minion. She was the inspiration.
She too was fresh off the boat in overalls.
That was the uniform of our people. Biddy boo boo bee.
I want you to leave.
Me too. No one had seen oranges before. They were a luxury item and were often given as a Christmas gift, which is also bizarre.
Yeah.
So good-looking oranges like ours were highly
How
valued.
many times do I have to unwrap this thing?
There's 4 more layers. Also, it's filled with teeth. So people really wanted them, so we kept shipping them out on the new railroad. In 1887, ventilated rail cars came out, allowing oranges to stay fresh longer. By that year, just a decade after the first shipment was sent out, 2,000 rail cars were going out every year. Then in 1889, refrigerated shipping box cars called reefers came out, and from then on, what happened could only be described as reefer madness.
It's got all the kids talking.
You want a reefer? I can afford a box. Come on.
Come on, what are you crazy? It'll
Now-
make you feel good. I mean, yeah, have property makes me feel good. To own something will make me feel good. You're right.
So now oranges could keep for longer, and sales went up even more. By 1892, 4,000 train loads were being shipped out a year. Also in 1892, they sent some oranges out of LA to the East Coast and then onto a boat to Liverpool and then down to Queen Victoria herself, who ate them and boldly proclaimed them to be very palatable.
And how British that is.
Yeah.
They're right, this is food.
And she sent back the rinds out of politeness. Did you want this? In 1904, 31,422 carloads of oranges were shipped out of California. In 1906, to keep up with this demand, Southern Pacific/Union Pacific created a subdivision called Pacific Fruit Express Company and built 6,000 new reefers and became the country's biggest buyer and maker of ice. That many reefers hadn't been built again until Bob Marley.
Oh, gosh.
By the early 1920s, there were around 50,000 carloads of oranges leaving the state annually. So it just like exponentially, more and more oranges. Towns dependent on orange sales started popping up along the railroad tracks, like the hometown of a certain little old lady, Pasadena. So
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
you try to keep up. Puns are flying left and right.
There's a lot of Beach Boy references in here. You got to keep up.
Those are not the Beach Boys.
Oh, my God.
Is that Dan and Gene? If it's not the Beach Boys, I assume it's Dan and Gene.
It's not Dan and Gene, it's Jan and Dean. Wow.
No, I'm talking about someone else.
Not the musicians.
Yeah, not musicians. These guys I know. Dan
They're
and
more-
Gene. I
they're-
knew it sounded weird.
They're more Port Laureates, really.
Oh, boy.
God.
Somebody stop me. So now the second reason oranges took off like this in the 1870s was for something that LA can't quite claim responsibility for, but it still has to be mentioned. I'll try not to glorify it too much because it started in the town that begs to not be glorified, Riverside. There had been attempts to try to introduce a new species of orange that could dethrone the Valencia, but none of them were superior until suddenly they were.
What?
In 1820, a mutant was born. No, it wasn't Beast as portrayed by Kelsey Grammer. It was a mutant orange that grew so big it ate all of Riverside. So it was a mutant orange that started growing on a sour orange tree down in a monastery in Bahia, Brazil. Bahia, whatever. Brazil, the homeland of the Olympics. What was mutant about it was that it seemed to have began growing a conjoined twin that was never quite formed. Kind of like how you were born.
In Brazil?
In Brazil.
As a boy from Brazil?
Yeah, a little Brazilian boy that ate his own twin. As a result, from this conjoined twin thing, it had a strange disfiguration that looked like a belly button on the bottom. You might see where this is going. A local missionary saw this weird orange and decided, I must eat this immediately. So he cut it open and found that it was not only really sweet, but it was also seedless. And wanting more of them, he made a cutting of this orange. Normally a fruit tree or anything, they're grown by planting the seeds of the fruit and watching them grow big and plump. But this mutant orange had no seeds, so what had to be done was a process where you graft the buds of this fruit onto the trunk or the roots of a normally producing tree, and then these grafted buds kind of take over and that tree starts bearing duplicates of whatever seedless fruit it is you put in there. In essence, a clone army. So decades later, in 1873, some of the seedlings from these oranges were sent to William Saunders of the United States Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. Now enter a woman named Eliza Tibbets. Since she's not really a part of LA history, I'll just give you a rundown of her greatest hits to give you an idea of who she was. Born in Cincinnati, married 3 times, divorced twice, marched alongside Frederick Douglass in 1871 in a march for women's suffrage. This is the 1800s, remember that. She adopted an African-American child. She was a white woman. Again, this is the 1800s.
Yeah, this is witch stuff.
She's a witch.
Yeah.
She was briefly a spiritualist who led seances in New York City.
Oh boy.
You must be a spiritualist to know that. She tried with her husband to start an integrated borderline communist community in Virginia just a few years after the Civil War ended.
Wow.
She was way ahead of her time, an incredibly interesting person who we'll never fully discuss because she's a traitor from the boonies. She's not an LA person. She and her husband were living in DC in the early 1870s and were neighbors with Saunders of the USDA. Her husband had lost all of their money, so in 1872 they decided to move to a cheaper place, perhaps the cheapest place, Riverside, California.
Oh boy.
After a year, they decided they wanted to try to make an agricultural life for themselves there, so they wrote back to their friend Saunders at the USDA for recommendations on what he thought would grow well in that environment. Saunders happened to be communicating with the monastery in Brazil about their orange clones at the time, so he decided to ask for some seedlings, and he sent 3 of them to his friend out in California. Eliza picked them up from the train in LA and took them back home to the clutches of Riverside, where she watered them with her old dishwater and watched them grow. 1 got trampled by a cow, but 2 is the new 3, especially in Riverside. The trees began bearing their mutant fruit, and words started getting around about this new thing. Hey, orange berry. Hey, Marvin citrus. You know that new fruit you're looking for? Well, here it is. Yeah. So alternately, you get the point. Alternately known at the beginning for its various points of origin as the Washington, the Riverside, or Bahia, the name that was constant for whatever location it was credited with was that it was a navel orange. Okay. So this is the navel orange that we're talking about. The navel, again, being the malformed rind of the second aborted twin. Delicious.
As long as we're being clear about it, yeah.
I never really liked navels because you open it and the navel grossed me out, but those smaller sections of the orange that you'll find, there's the main parts and then there's like little sections of orange in there. That's the malformed second orange. That's what you're eating.
Okay.
You can always spot a navel because it has a navel, and it always will have a navel because, like I said, all navel oranges are identical genetic clones of that original mutant found back in the early 1800s. Weird. So every single navel orange you eat is a clone of a 200-year-old orange.
Weird.
It's really weird. Yeah. In addition to being very sweet and seedless, they were also easier to peel, and they grew in the winter. So now there could be navel production in the winter and Valencia in the summer. So the orange industry was ready for its close-up. Yeah. A neighbor of Eliza's, Sam McCoy, actually took some buds from her navel and started his own, and he took better care of it, so his actually bore fruit first, which he took to the Southern California Horticultural Fair on January 22nd, 1879, and he won first prize, and from there the navel took off. No more navel gazing, navel eating. The superiority of the navel became clear quickly, and Eliza Tibbets started selling cuttings from her 2 original trees. They were revered by people, so other growers wanted them. People were paying up to $5 just to get a bud to start their own navel tree, which is about $100 today, just for a little clipping. One year they earned $20,000 just from the sales of the cuttings. Almost all navel oranges now grown in California are clones of these 2 trees. The story didn't end quite so nicely for the Tibbets, who were constantly being sued for various water and land issues until the real estate market crashed in 1887, where they lost everything and both died penniless over the next couple of decades.
Wow, okay.
Welcome to Riverside.
Kind to all.
All that's left is a statue of Eliza in downtown Riverside, and what I'm not sure but might be one of her 2 original trees, which got replanted in front of the Mission Inn in 1903 by Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. Yeah. This tree, which may or may not be one of the originals, is still there, even though it almost went the way its brother did in 1921 and nearly died from some pests in 2014. It's also a California landmark. It's definitely a very old tree, but some people say, like, yeah, it's one of her 2, or maybe it's just a really old tree. I'm not sure if it's full story, so get on it, Riverside Meekly. To even further this 2-fisted boon in the 1870s, a new process was developed to help speed up the time it takes for a fruit tree to bear fruit that they called budding. So this is when they take a faster growing root and then graft the kind of fruit tree you want to grow onto that. So normally it would take an orange tree 15 years to bear fruit at full capacity, but with this method it takes 5.
Wow, okay.
And with that, what they call the second gold rush began. In 1870, there were around 30,000 orange trees in LA. By 1880, there were almost 200,000. And in 1890, there were over 1 million.
Like the growth is so immense.
Hey, we had the room. Orange groves were seeing profits of between 1,000 to 3,000 per acre. They started doing citrus fairs in LA, which I think you're going to get to. That's how like central of a part of the lifestyle here that it was.
Yeah.
Orange growers in California were making 4 times as much as the average worker in the rest of the country.
Wow.
For a brief moment, LA was the center of the orange empire, but after a real estate boom in the city during the 1870s and 80s, it kind of hindered our orange development. So the crux of it all really shifted to what was called the Orange Belt, which is the area around San Gabriel and the San Bernardino Mountains.
Yeah.
So these areas, they have a mild climate and the soil was really like sediment rich, with the mountains protected them. So the towns in these areas really prospered a lot. Pasadena and Whittier gave it a run for its money, but we have to cede the crown to Riverside on this one because they were really the capital of kind of all of this.
Because they had a lot of space because nobody wants to live there.
Well, I know 2 people who died and made some room. In 1895, Riverside had the highest per capita income in the country, all because of oranges. I'll touch briefly on who was actually doing the hard labor to grow these oranges because it's insulting not to, but also just briefly because that's an episode all on its own. Orange trees, they're very labor intensive and they need attention year round in order to really produce, like I do. In the early days, the field hands were all Kich and other local natives. But once those people started mysteriously disappearing, the growers switched over to Chinese labor, which was convenient because citrus existed in China and many people had experience with this sort of thing. By 1885, 80% of the field workers were Chinese, and then they started mysteriously disappearing as well after things like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 took effect and the Scott Act of 1888 that denied re-entry of Chinese laborers who stepped foot outside the U.S., and then the Geary Act of 1892 that strengthened the Chinese Exclusion Act.
We're so grateful for your work, though.
Thank you for your service. Don't cross the border. Strangely enough, oppressing your workforce tends to diminish your workforce. So since there weren't as many Chinese left by the early 1900s, the work shifted to Japanese people and Filipino people and Sikhs and regular old honkies. A few of them were in there. But of course, as the years went on, it shifted almost unanimously toward Mexican workers, men working the fields, women packing them up. With the women, actually, they often earned just as much as the men did, which is like weird progressiveness, but also, my God, the racism that they experienced. It was things like that that led to the violent strikes that happened in Orange County during the Great Depression. But again, get on it, O.C. Meekly. We're not covering that. We're busy.
We've got our own mess to deal with. Sorry, I'm playing with an orange right now, so I'm only
I feel like I'm talking to an orange right now. You know, delicious,
Caring.
engaging, charismatic.
Shelled.
Fell from a tree earlier today. But it wasn't just in the fields where there were some issues. The actual process of selling the oranges was deeply flawed. Obviously, the oranges were popular, but that was kind of the problem with all this. The average grower didn't have a huge operation going. The average grower had between 5 to 10 acres. So for them, this wasn't really big business. And actually getting their product into the markets in the East took a lot of money and effort that they didn't always have. But that's where the money was, so they had to do it. So there was so much business going on that it oftentimes cost more to run a grove than they were earning selling it. So oranges became almost too popular for their own good, and people started to take advantage of that. As a grower, you were at the mercy of the wholesale sellers. So at first, what would happen was the grower would grow the oranges, then one of these shipping agents would come and give a price, and then the picking, shipping, and selling were now the agent's problem. The growers got the money, it's their problem.
You figure this out.
The grower had his money, so he didn't care what the shipping agents did with the fruit. But once the boom happened, the power shifted to the shipping agents, so they decided to change their terms. The growers were now responsible for the picking, packing, shipping, and selling, and there was so much supply that the agents would often underbid the growers and force them to accept these terms where the agent had no responsibility on the quality of the fruit once it was shipped. So if all the fruit got spoiled on its way east, the agent didn't have to pay the grower anything, and the grower lost all of their money. Or just as likely, the agent would say that the fruit all spoiled and pay the grower nothing, but then actually take that fruit and sell it, you know, on the black market for their own personal profit. There was absolutely no government oversight and no quality assurance to the customers, and as a result, the reputation of all California oranges suffered. These were known as the red ink years. There had been some attempts amongst the growers to protect themselves from this sort of thing. There were groups like the Los Angeles Pomological Society that would meet to try to discuss how to fix the system. Then in 1885, the first actual union was created as the Orange Growers Protective Union, but they and all the others like them failed. And then a depression hit in 1893 and things got even worse. The growers were now firmly in the palms of the shipping agents, especially now since less people were buying luxury items like oranges.
Yeah.
Lots of nurseries started burning young orange trees because they just couldn't sell them. Like there was no reason for them.
Jesus.
It was vitamin C for recession. And then Big Daddy was born. Go to bed, kids. Daddy's born. On April 4th, 1893, 100 citrus growers from all over Southern California met on the second floor of a building at Main and 2nd in downtown LA and came up with a plan for the growers to band together to pool their fruit and share the costs of shipping and marketing. That fall, they were fully operational as the Southern California Fruit Growers Exchange, and they were an immediate success. They were out of the pockets of corrupt shipping agents and into those of people who were hired to look out for their best interests.
Yeah.
They built hundreds of packing houses that all the growers could share in places like Pacoima, Reseda, Canoga Park, and San Fernando. Profits were finding their way to the people who actually deserved it.
Yeah.
They were so successful that growers in Northern California started joining them as well, which is why in 1895 they incorporated and had to rename themselves the California Fruit Growers Exchange. By 1905, they represented over 5,000 growers in California and had annual sales of over $7 million. There were competing organizations, but none of them were as successful because the Growers Exchange was open to experimentation and new ideas. For example, even with refrigerated shipping, they were losing up to 25% of their product each time. So the union appealed to the USDA to figure out a better way to ship oranges, who granted federal help since they saw this as an interstate issue. They sent a man named G. Harold Powell.
Harold Powell.
Is he in Dan and Gene? Is he the G in Dan and Gene?
Yeah, he's the live man's curve.
The large young man from Altadena. So they sent this guy out, they sent Dan and Gene out to investigate, and he saw the problem not being with the methods of transportation, but in the methods of picking the actual fruit.
Oh,
He suggested that pickers wear gloves and that they use better clippers that wouldn't harm the fruit when they were taken off the tree. Never pull an orange off a tree, but rather clip the stem close to the fruit because that can damage the tree, and keeping the picked fruit in the shade until it can get into the packing house. The union adopted these methods and they worked, and even more money started coming in. They even instigated a crazy idea of growers being paid by the day and not by the box to encourage more careful handling and better, more attention paid rather than just rushing to get it out. The union also invested in scientific research to start breeding a better orange and created the Citrus Experiment Station in 1906, which eventually became UC Riverside.
Wow.
The Growers Exchange became the heart of the California citrus industry. Then in 1907, they formed an offshoot called the Fruit Growers Supply Company, who helped supply growers with things like fertilizer and irrigation systems, and even bought a lumber mill in Siskiyou County, upstate, to provide lumber for the shipping crates of their growers. They even dabbled in marketing ideas, and in 1908 came up with a cute term to help sell their product: Sunkist.
Like kissed by the sun?
Kissed by a rose. Seal? Seal. Use your words. And that brings us to our next section of this episode.
I'm going to be talking about
Kissed by the sun. Kissed?
Frenched by the sun.
Macked by the sun. I'm
S-O-N.
totally macking with the sun.
I'm going to talk about how the Growers Exchange used advertising to boost Southern California as a destination, whether intentional or unintentional.
Son of a gon. Go on.
Keep working on that. The real
I'll get
heyday
back to
was from 1915 to 1950, so I'm going to concentrate, pun intended, mostly on that. Oh, sun-kissed, like the orange soda? Yeah, but also like not even.
I mean, come on.
Los Angeles really is a weird place to me because much longer than the movie industry has been sending the homing beacon out, drawing people in, Southern California has been luring people to the Pacific.
Yeah.
People from the Midwest and East Coast had flocked westward, not just because of Manifest Destiny or Westward Ho, but they chased this illusion of an idyllic paradise they saw from the labels of orange crates, which was all a creation. All of this wanting to come to Southern California was like planned, which is really weird to me.
It's weird that you could see the wrapper of
an orange, yeah.
Yeah, but imagine today seeing like a picture on the back of a Snickers bar and being like they're gonna move to Hershey, Pennsylvania.
With California fruit crate labels, not just fruit was being sold, but like any good Don Draper pitch, you were buying the first step to your better self. Fruit crate labels not only sold oranges, they sold real estate. Perfect. It's a little bit different, but it's perfect.
Peggy, it's an orange. It's perfect.
It's a little bit different, but it's perfect. At the time...
Peggy, I need these for alcohol. For alcoholic reasons.
I'm going to ferment them. A little bit different, but it's perfect. At the time, nothing defined Southern California better than oranges. In the 19th century, as you were talking about, most Americans didn't even know what an orange was. In the early 1800s, some fruit growers working on their own groves. You talked about this already.
What?
Individually wrapped.
But say it again, because the individually wrapping really became kind of, as I understand it, was kind of like, it's individually wrapped. Like, this is something special.
But the thing about that, I'll get into that later, but I'll just say it now. They wanted to step away from the individually wrapped fruit because they wanted to sell it as a... No, everyone could eat it. It's not special. It's not a luxury item. It's every day. Eat it every day. Eat a lot of them. Come on.
I'll bite right into one. Look, this poor guy's eating one.
What is this, Starburst? I gotta unwrap each one? No, put them all in a bowl.
Bobbing for oranges never took off.
Throughout much of the push for Americans to consume oranges, there was this insistence that like, hey, yeah, let's make this an everyday thing. Mm-hmm. Visualizing California in those days, like the mid 19th century, was like already an alien concept to people in the Midwest and East Coast. Until an 1884 novel, Ramona, was released, written by Massachusetts native Helen Hunt Jackson, who had spent time out here. She was a longtime friend of Emily Dickinson. The novel was set in old California amongst like the ruins of the Spanish missions that were rendered inactive when the Mexicans defeated the Spanish for the area. Consult Los Angeles Year One. The narrative depicts the life of the fading Spanish order, the oppression of the Native American tribes here, and the invasion of white settlers from the perspective of an illegitimate orphan, Ramona. In the novel, California... I'm just happy that we're both on the same page. We didn't know the lyrics, but we knew how it went. In the novel, California is like a romantic, dramatic paradise, and soon literary tours were made to show off the, quote, real life locations, and it boosted tourism, even though Jackson died without making clear where the locations were actually based on.
The original esoteric.
This was a hotel, too. Great. That's not true. I'm just being
if Ramona did like mini golf, she would come here.
People have ponytails here, too. Hey, he's right. The book was released a year after Henry Huntington gained full control of a number of smaller railroads, creating the Southern Pacific Sunset Route, which connected, like you said, Southern California with many other parts of the world. Consult, you're killing me, Larry. The railroads were used for promoting California as a winter vacation destination to all those on the East Coast that didn't know better. Because in the winters here, there was a bit warmer, so you can...
A bit. Like 80 degrees warmer.
Yeah, about 75 compared to 20. So around the 1890s, as you said, citrus packing houses wanted to distinguish their fruit crates from other wooden crates that were being shipped out at the same time, and you wanted to make yours a little bit different. Previously, the growers would stencil the names on the heads of their crates, but now paper labels had entered the game, thus commercial advertising was a possibility. The first labels were small circles of paper around 6 inches in diameter, and they were placed at the center of a stencil design. Those circle labels were soon replaced with the larger rectangular labels, which are 11 by 10, and each packing house had a name to identify their product. The common theme was sunshine and landscapes, and they were meant to sell scenes. Even in those early days, they were selling more than just oranges with the ads. They were selling sunshine, health, and wealth. They were trying to rap at the time. Nobody knew what they were talking about. I mean, lay a beat down. What does that mean?
What rhymes with orange?
As one writer puts it, the hallmarks of Southern California, health, wealth, and sunshine. It was edible gold. They even called it golden apples for a while. There was a brand called
yeah, that's right.
There was brands like Victoria brand, Gypsy Queen, Elk brand, Hollywood, Highbrow, Blue Top, Sure No Seeds, which is one name, Shining Star, and Warrior, to name a few. But not all of them had anything to do with oranges or fruit or California. Some of them just used images that would catch attention. Bunny brand had a large, ominous drawing of a stoic-looking rabbit with a small, individually wrapped orange at the bottom. It's really scary.
If the listener heard that screaming noise, that's the bunny.
I'm going to upload that picture for sure, because the bunny just looks like a terrifying ghost of a rabbit that's huge, and then there's a little orange at the bottom. Like, I'm scared.
Some of the weird pictures I've seen of like a boy standing next to like a 40-foot orange and that sort of thing.
Yeah, like a kid smiling and there's like he's missing teeth, and there's just a grove behind him. Like, all right. Athlete brand oranges had 3 athletes running towards a finish line. Royal Knight had an image of a proud knight on a horse with a castle behind him, and in the distance was an orange grove. Co-ed brand oranges out of Claremont had an image of a pretty college graduate in cap and gown smiling, no orange in sight. In the 30s, there was a fruit crate label with W.C. Fields on it, using an image from the film It's a Gift. The film itself is about a New Jersey grocer who moves to California because he heard that he inherited some money and wants to fulfill his dream of owning a California orange grove. It's one of his better ones.
Is his nose the orange?
That's the joke. Oh man, the twist ending. More important than selling oranges, which the crate was full of, they were selling the origin of these oranges. That's what rhymes with oranges. They were selling California. These golden apples come from a place where the sun smiles happily upon the groves. Don't you want to move there?
Yes.
Yes, please. Packing houses created 3 different kinds of labels. One for high-grade fruit, one for mid-grade, and one for the bottom of the barrel. For
the Floridas.
The citrus was small, poorly textured, or
fugly for Florida.
Fugly.
Ugly.
Let Urban Dictionary. Let Urban Dictionary know.
Hello, Urban Dictionary.
yeah, what? Snapple. That's how we say hi, because we're Urban Dictionary. Low-grade, ugly-looking fruit needed labeling too, you know. One brand called Mutt and read, not much for looks, but ripe, sweet, and juicy. Another brand was called Camouflage. The quality is on the inside.
Oh, that makes me sad.
No, I feel like they're describing me.
They're like the Jelly Belly jelly flops, like the defective jelly beans, which I love. These are the oranges they would sell while you're waiting in line at Ross.
We know that you had to beat up a small child to get these chinos, but here's some really bad looking oranges. They need love.
Want some mutts?
Lithography was used to create the labels because it was one of the only ways at the time to mass produce images. But as time went on, they eventually switched to zincography, which I'm trying to get a better hold on the idea of both of them. One of them used stone and the other one used plates. I'm still kind of confused. No. They both ended up on paper. In the 1890s, Max Schmidt, a San Francisco printer, got into the business of designing, printing, and selling orange crate labels. The important thing here was that he was not a grower. He saw an opportunity to work with growers.
I had to write that phrase so many times, and you can't say he's not a grower. You gotta find a better way to say that.
And I just stopped my boots right through that. This guy's a grower. He's a growther.
He was the opposite of a shower.
Schmidt saw an opportunity to step up the quality of labeling fruit crates, and he went for it. His staff artists were Othello Machete and Archie Vasquez, who was an LA native. Together, Schmidt lithography created a significant genre of folk art, the orange crate label. Although most growthers used colors in the labels, which was important for showing California, these Schmidt labels used vibrant colors, later made famous by painter Maxwell Parrish. Colors with subtlety. There was apricot, cobalt blue, sea green, cinnamon. They were really subtle colors.
Was there orange?
It was either red or yellow. They couldn't figure it out. They used real oranges. They just hinted down. It was part of the lithography.
I think I read that the question was which came first, the orange, the fruit, or the orange, the color? And I think it was the fruit.
Really? Oranges made orange?
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? That
orange is the new orange.
How bizarre. It's we've never seen that color before.
It was all very hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
What's an orange? What would grow here?
Schmidt encouraged each grower to collaborate with him in the creation of an individual label, and then the game was stepped up significantly. The orange box label artists were mainly working in lithographs, doing a wide variety of commercial artwork like show cards and posters and ads and business forms and stock certificates. They were part of a company, so you don't just do fruit crate labels. It was part of your job. It was just one of the things you did. Label design was a high-pressure job. Staff artists were expected to work hard and produce quality work quickly. Consequently, there was a high turnover among lithograph house artists. You got tired of it, and then you left and you went somewhere better, or you started your own company where you didn't have to do fruit crate labels.
You went to Disney.
And then you begged to be fired from Disney. Many became freelance artists or switched firms often. And since this was a commercial work, it couldn't be signed. You were an artist cog, and you worked in a corporation. You have to like the corporation as a whole. You can't be
the sound of this. Now, this is the America I want to live in. Ayn Rand's America.
You shut up and put your head down. Nameless. So let's name a few artists, because they're very rarely named. Ambrose Brenninger was the head of instructor of the Brino College of Lithography that taught many young artists how to work on these crate labels. The most influential was Charles Everett Johnson, who was a native from Gilroy, which is up on the 14 freeway. He was working at Lord & Thomas, who was the main ad agency for Sunkist. He was working there, and he was in charge of the Sunkist accounts in the meaty years, the 20s to the 40s. He operated a freelance studio in LA with such beautiful fruit crate labels as the Sunny Cove labels, which, saying that without you knowing, I'm just talking about an ad, but we'll put pictures up.
It was the they do exist of their day.
Exactly.
There was the beef.
I was just trying to put that phrase in my mouth. Like the beef, which is where it went.
Got orange. Just orange.
The color of the fruit. Duncan Gleason was one of his employees who was a fine artist. Andrew Loomis was another one who worked, aside from fruit labels, he worked on Coca-Cola tray illustrations. Sam Hyde. Trays.
Like the things you would carry them in, like the fruit crates of soda bottles?
I didn't think about that. I thought there was TV dinner trays. All that came to mind, didn't investigate, but that's probably what they meant, was the carriers for soda.
Either way makes just as much sense.
Either way, they're irrelevant now. Yeah. Sam Hyde Harris, an award-winning poster artist and easel painter in LA. Earl Cordry, Jamie Swimmerton was a cartoonist. Adrian Apple, like apples and oranges. I assume people told him that joke all the time.
Traitor.
Ralph Baker, C.A. Beck. Ted Clark was a prolific artist who worked on fruitcake labels. J. Frank Derby studied in Los Angeles. He was the one who created the Orange Queen label that we lost our poo over at the Archive Bazaar.
Yeah, is that the one I took?
Yeah, that's the one you don't want.
It's not the one with the cherubic little boy sitting on his belly. It's the lady.
It's a lady, and she's pretty. The labels of Charles J. Dickman are really nice. They lovely California California designs.
She must not have been from Florida.
Or else she'd have one eye.
And be turned to juice.
Felix Martini did a Highland Grove design that I think is really nice. He would travel around California, just do oil paintings of landscapes, and then would like sell them to people. So around 1907, the Fruit Growers Exchange was prospering and were shipping California oranges in record numbers. So they started thinking about advertising in more earnest ways. They were doing spectacular, providing the packaging and shipping for growers, but now the exchange created the task for refashioning the American diet so that oranges would be included. It's very much like Inception, like we want to make them want it. We want you to ask us for a thing that you don't know about.
We can't just tell them they want it. They have to know that they want it.
And they also need to know what it is first. The orange would put to rest the anxieties of urban Americans. They would restore
What a sentence.
I know. The orange was going to restore their health, vigor, and make them want to be one with nature again. If you were an urbanite who lived in like Chicago at the
most urban place you can think of, Des Moines.
You jumped ahead.
Is Des Moines really coming up?
Yeah.
Man, I must be some sort of witch man.
Some sort of orange witch man. The exchange would convince millions of Americans to eat millions of oranges. That was their job, and they actually pulled it off. To do this, they needed a national campaign, and for that, they needed help. There was some reluctance among board members of the exchange to put too much money into advertising because they wanted to concentrate more on banking on California's appeal instead of creating a brand and capitalizing it, because then nothing would separate them from the many growers out there in the rest of, in like Florida or whatever. It seemed like the trick was to do both. Create a recognizable brand name while still using the appeal of the Golden State to sell the idea of sunshine-baked oranges. The exchange partnered with Sun Pacific's E.O. McCormick and allocated $10,000 towards sending a special orange train to Iowa, promoting the oranges for health, California for wealth is the tag they went with.
Close to Des Moines.
Iowa was the center of the campaign, specifically Des Moines.
Boy,
and I cannot figure out why Iowa, but it was just probably, I'm sure they took a study like it's dead.
It goes great with corn.
In March of 1908, it was declared Orange Week in Iowa. Much like nowadays when it's like National Dog Day out of nowhere. It's like that. It was like, hey, we're making a thing, buy oranges. And the area would be granted with oranges by the carload direct from the beautiful groves of California, they had read. The choicest orange groves in the world, which, sure. The exchange was working with an advertising group called, like I said, Lord and Thomas, which now goes by Foot, Cone, and Belding, FCB Global. They should have stayed with Lord and Thomas. In creating a 3-color newspaper ad in black, green, and orange promoting the oranges. It contained a cartoon by Dan
and Jean were part of this?
Jan, Dan, Dean, and Jean were part of this. They're the new Peter, Paul, and Mary.
One boy for everyone.
There was a cartoon by J.N. Ding Darling. You can see why it was hard for me to say. J.N. Ding Darling. And it was given space in the Des Moines Register. This was the first print ad for the California Oranges, running in the March 2nd Register of 1908. A lecturer was hired for Orange Week in Iowa to tour larger towns in Iowa and elaborate on the many advantages of the orange industry. While the nation saw an increase of orange consumption, business in Iowa gained a stunning 50% after Orange Week.
My God.
Yeah, it worked. While creating the campaign for Iowa, it was suggested that instead of using the exchanges...
If you peel it.
Yeah, so when they came up with the name, Daniel mentioned this already, so I'm just going to go over it one more time. While creating the campaign in Iowa, it was suggested instead of using the exchange's name as a brand to reiterate the Southern Californian Fruit Growers Exchange.
Well, it was just
California Fruit
Growers,
CFGE.
Because it wasn't just the South anymore.
But
the South will rise again, much like orange prices.
Am I right? That's the comedian that had to tour Iowa that week. Am I right? I mean, this thing's wrapped already. Someone suggested as a brand name Sunkist, Kissed, a kiss by the sun. Got a blister in the sun. Some board members resisted this because so many dealers already were familiar with the exchange's name. They thought they might lose business if they confused people, but they told them go suck a lemon, which they could have. They were ample at the time.
That would only help business.
They adopted the brand name Sunkist with a T instead of the SSED, so now we have Sunkist. Sunkist spoke to both the sunshine in California and the orange itself. It was it was kissed by the sun. The exchange...
It's perfect. Peggy, we did it again. It's perfect.
It's a little bit different, but it's perfect.
Peggy, don't tell me what happens past season 2. It's a spoiler. I'm not there yet.
Peggy, who does Negan kill? Peggy.
Peggy, by God. Peggy, please tell me. Did Negan make the Coca-Cola theme song? Peggy, did Negan kill modern advertising?
Did Negan kill a radio star?
Say it so, Peggy. Peggy, does Walter White make it? Peggy, please.
Does the C word get him? Or is it the G word gun? Hey.
Peggy, for the love of God, tell me one thing. Who shot JR?
It was a dream that we all had. As a nation, we had a dream together. But he's alive. All right. The Exchange became the first farmer group to advertise a perishable product in a national campaign. And a year later, the Exchange registered the trademark Sunkist. They were the first group, the co-op, that did this.
What year was this?
Around 1908. To ensure that each little stamped sticker stayed on the piece of fruit, the Exchange offered a promotional gift to consumers. For every 12 wrappers and 12 cents a consumer turned in, they would receive a sharp-pointed spoon for eating oranges cut in half.
What?
So when you have a
sharp-pointed spoon.
Like, so when you have an orange, you cut it in half and you want to like dig stuff out. It's like a spoon, but
like
it's
a deep dish, nature's deep dish pizza.
Exactly, nature.
That's so weird to think like why there's little stickers on oranges now.
Yeah.
They don't come in crates anymore, so we have to put these stickers on.
Yeah. The spoon idea, though, the sharp-pointed spoon, was a success. They had thousands of orders for that, and the Exchange had to add knives and forks to the offer. The trademark replaced more than 200 individual brand names that were being used in 1901, dominated more like. With acts like these, the orange and California were becoming interlocked as a symbol. So 1914 is the next year that the Exchange would make a huge waves with advertising for California oranges. In that year, consumption of oranges by Americans had increased by 79%.
That's ridiculous.
From the next to no orange years.
People were so gullible.
The rubes. I keep, like, every time I read, when I was doing research, I'm like, you just pull a truck up and you say it's for sale, they'll buy it. Country bumpkins. That being said, I give money to everybody.
That being said, I own an orange truck.
Would you like to buy some oranges? I can't seem to sell them. In 1885, there were like no oranges sold. So their intent now was to push American values onto Americans even more and somehow make you want
American values onto
Americans. They
So
created
they're
values.
recreating
Values. And like, don't you want to be sunshine?
Yeah.
Don't you find morals good? I don't know, maybe. Don Francisco, the future ad man for the Exchange, was at the time was a fruit inspector. Don's a fruit inspector. But moving up the ranks at Lord and Thomas, Francisco continued pushing for oranges to be part of the daily diet and pushed for it to be a breakfast food, since breakfast is a habit meal. Everyone has breakfast. He also believed that selling California meant selling oranges. He knew that these things were interlocked. In 1914, the Exchange ran their first ad in a national circulating periodical, the Saturday Evening Post, which was a big deal. Not only because the Post was seen by millions of Americans, but it also seemed to echo and reinforce the image of modern America. Advertising in magazines wasn't exploited at the time, but it was about to be. Francisco became the advertising manager in 1916, and him and a guy named Robert P. Crane, who worked for Lord and Thomas as a copywriter, his main account was Sunkist. They hit upon a cluster of advertising themes: health, domestic happiness, prosperity, respectability. That would all be accomplished if you ate an orange, basically. That would, orange from California.
You want to be respected?
Eat an orange.
You want to be wealthy?
Eat an orange.
You want to cure your scurvy?
California orange. None of that Florida stuff. California. Making the orange part of breakfast was difficult, but he solved it when he found a functioning juice extractor, and so they ran the campaign Drink an Orange. Now you think something like orange juice was just come upon naturally, like a woman gets tired of chewing, so she squeezes it into a cup, like an organic process that seems so obvious that everyone
partakes. Why does it have to be a woman? Why can't men invent anymore?
Because I wouldn't want it.
Squeeze through those burly paws? No.
He's trying to compete with me. If a woman does it, it's motherly. It's nice. If a man does it, what do you want from me? You trying to tell me that I can't do that too? You'd think it's like a thing that like generations had, like, yeah, you just squeeze an orange and nope. Team of admin sitting around screaming at a fruit. Why can't we make more money off of you? How do you make more money for us? Orange juice was being pushed by the Exchange's advertising men as part of a healthy breakfast regime or ritual, however they wanted to push it. They were intent on creating a juice habit. Sunkist quickly developed its own electrically powered juice extractors and offered it at a cost to fountain operators. And by 1932, 66,000 juicers were in operation, and Sunkist could claim that drinking orange juice had turned into a ritual. It was being marketed as
so weird.
It is so weird. It was being marketed as being better than artificial drinks.
It's not even the best juice. Apple's better.
It's not as cold.
I mean, I guess the pulp can kind of freeze a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I can't have oranges or orange juice because I've acid reflux, so I had to say wave goodbye to that. So I gotta.
The California dream will never be yours.
I just drink alcohol instead, which is
the new California dream.
By 1922, they could quote doctors' studies in claiming that oranges contained something called vitamins, spelled vitamine at the time. Vitamins. And when they were being used, they were saying that in ads, juice and vitamin C were good and good for you, helps keep the body young. These campaigns were directly aimed at middle-class hopes for a good moral life, and by doing so, further linked these hopes with a subliminal association to Southern California. After they ran their first ad in Saturday Evening Post, they spent 2 years after that placing advertisements in over 500 daily newspapers and more than a dozen national magazines, as well as recipe books, and continued promoting on posters you'd see on billboards, on streetcars. Francisco was also working on creating quality crate labels still. He was very influential in label design of the 20s with these principles. The label should be designed and the brand should be selected with the buyer in mind. The brand name should be short, and both the brand name and the label should be simple. The brand name and the label should be prominent. The label should suggest the contents of the package. The label should be pleasing and artistic. The label or the brand name should suggest the source of the fruit. Crate labels in the 20s to the 40s, they all had these sort of things. They're like, oh yeah, there's a giant font there, simple name, there's a little scene there, and everything's really simple.
So is Don Francisco is a person?
Yeah.
His first name is Don.
Yeah, he didn't work on a mission.
Okay.
Yeah, Donald Francisco.
Is that where Donald Duck orange juice comes from?
We figured it out. He's Donald Duck.
Isn't Don Francisco also a coffee brand or something?
I don't know. I could just think of Sanka.
That's him.
Yeah, that's him. Among other things, they push oranges for health. This is healthy for you. It's good for you. This is going to keep you alive. Oranges were prominent in these images, but you'd see themes that existed before that Francisco thought could relate to health and prosperity, an exotic element of Southern California. Some imagery you'd see women and children, you see birds and animals, entertainment properties, which was kind of weird. Things like Caesar, the chic Egyptian, Cleopatra, Don Juan. Also brands like actor, film star, Hollywood, Broadway, coming out of Pomona and Downey. You saw storybook characters, stylized images. There's a really nice one of Art Deco peacocks with a little individually wrapped orange, Art Deco butterflies, you had fairies. They got really creative and fun. So the ability for Americans to travel across the country was becoming much easier as our ability to communicate longer distances was more available to us. Although it was 40 years after railroads were expanding out, the radio was connecting the nation together too. After World War I, which at the time they were calling the only world war we're going to have, commercial broadcasting began.
And yet we still keep calling it World War I. World War Prime.
World War Gold. Commercial broadcasting began near the start of the 20s, and presidential election results could be broadcast. Prize fights, radio serials were like reaching the living rooms of American homes.
That's another way they tried to get us to eat cereal.
The Shadow is eating Lucky Charms. I don't know, a cereal at the time. They didn't have cereal. They had powdered milk and oatmeal.
Nothing was lucky back then.
Yeah. You're going to listen to some Irishmen trying to eat cereal? What's going on? I thought we lived in America.
Powdered milk and dead tree leaves. That was their cereal.
Throughout that decade, automobiles became more and more popular, and by the 30s, 1 in 5 Americans owned one. Then the Depression hit, and then you had to sell it. Cars also ruined the picturesque Los Angeles blue skies that you would see in fruit crate labels, and smog was another 10 years away, so great.
I'll be getting to that.
Americans were putting an emphasis on the good life, full of sunshine and health and youth and
it's
gold.
A good life.
It's a Be nice to the boy.
Be nice to the boy.
Be nice to the boy.
Our favorite Twilight Zone episode. Be nice to the boy. Which brings us to our mid-episode plug. Listen to our Twilight Zone episode on This Is Rad, the podcast.
We had a lot of fun.
A lot of fun with
Kyle Clark.
Kyle Clark from The Nerdist and other things and comedy, and Matt Burnside and Natalie Hazen.
And us.
Oh, yeah, we're there too.
We're there too.
Unfortunately. Listen to it. Proceed.
People living in cold Midwest towns looking for warm temperatures. People living in that hellhole that was New York or other big cities were looking for natural, beautiful landscapes. So these orange ads were like, I don't want to say it's all they had, but it was like, oh yeah, I'll go west. There was an unsaid westward expansion tone to some of it, and with that, you better believe you could make a buck from that. Money, 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 money.
That's the sound the trains made going out to California. Money, 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 money. With the radio once again, with the radio once again, the exchange is looking how to use this to advertise. They have enough money to experiment, and since that old noise box is popular, why not squeeze some orange juice all over it? Sunkist sponsors. Please don't do that.
You have to buy another one.
Somehow I feel like orange juice is much more, you'll get so much more electrocuted than with any, because it's so acidic.
Yeah, it's an explosive device. They use it in C4.
You talking about C4? Duncan.
Sunkist sponsors the first ever commercial radio broadcast between California to the East Coast. They do that. The first company to use motion picture stars on the radio as well, Sunkist.
Really?
Yeah.
What station was it? KSUN?
Yeah, no, I think it was one of the CBS stations, I believe. In 1928, Sunkist sponsored a program hosted by famed Hollywood gossip monster Luella Parsons. Parsons was one of...
Gossip monster.
Gossip monster. It's funny, I kept reading her name, like, how do I know that name? And I looked it up, like, oh, that's how, like, because everyone hated her. Parsons was the first American movie columnist, and she was pretty hated in the Hollywood community since her opinions would affect box office receipts. It's said that William Randolph Hearst kept her around because she praised Marion Davies, who was his mistress. She was incredibly popular in the newspapers of the day. On the program, she would have featured TV stars where they would discuss the juiciest, pun intended, gossip. In between catty remarks, Parson would hawk oranges and other Sunkist products. That's how it was done in the day.
This rumor of an affair brought to you by Grove Valley Oranges.
It hasn't gotten better if you watch shows or like answer a phone. They're like, obviously, oh, I have the new Apple here. What's that? I'm talking to you on my new iPhone right now. So it like it's gotten better.
We've gone from oranges to Apple. Think about it, everybody.
Think about it.
It's the new California industry. It used to be oranges, and now it's
Apples. Somebody's this country.
Interesting.
I'm not sure if the description I read was for another Sunkist program or they just didn't want to mention Parsons, but from a description I read, it ran every Wednesday for half an hour. It featured colorful Spanish music, Spanish in quotations, interspersed with the announcements on the superior richness, healthfulness, and flavors of Sunkist oranges and orange juice. That was just like plugs, Spanish music, plugs, Parsons.
It's like watching an infomercial. But that was like the only entertainment. All stations were broadcasting infomercials back then.
I don't know if it was called the Sunkist Musical Cocktail Show or if that was another Sunkist Parsons radio. But anyways, there's an LP that exists and it's digitized if you want to hear it online. And you can hear Ann Harding talk about Rudolph Valentino, which is like every description of me talking about I Love Lucy. It's like, yeah, Clark Gable, whoever that is talking about Gina Lollobrigida, whoever that is. Her best frenemy was another gossip columnist, Hedda Hopper, and she got her own Sunkist show in 1939, 10 years later. Hedda Hopper's Hollywood, which played on CBS stations in smaller American cities like Portland or Pittsburgh. Hedda Hopper had an even worse reputation. She was the most hated, the most arrogant columnist in Hollywood.
I think she wore crazy hats.
I think so too, yeah. I think I saw a picture of her with a crazy hat. It's rumored that Charlie Chaplin left America in the 40s because of Hopper's constant attacks on him for his sexual prowess, politics, and communist affiliation.
Yeah, that's why he left.
We didn't scare him away with saying we were going to arrest him for having sex with young women. I'm wondering if this is the same trip where, upon trying to come back to the government, wouldn't let him in because of his ties to communism. Consult Red is a new blacklist for that.
Also, he was Chinese.
I think you might be thinking of Charlie Chan.
Oh, no! All of those Halloween idea costumes.
I'm Charlie Chaplin. I'm sure you're not. Pretty sure that you're not Charlie Chaplin. Anyways, she had a show because oranges needed to get sold. It aired 3 times a week for 15 minutes on CBS until 1942. Both of these shows, as appealing as they sound now, were doing the job of attracting people to Hollywood and showcasing the real-life dramas of southern part of the Golden State.
So is Orange is the New Black not an advertisement by Sunkist?
I keep watching. They sound chickens to me. Sunkist would take out space in magazines where stars would share their recipes that used oranges. Myrna Loy of The Thin Men had a "Here are my 4 favorite orange recipes" full-page ad. Her 4 favorite: orange ginger ale, orange Charlotte.
Wait a minute now.
That sounds pretty good.
I like that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Orange Charlotte.
What's that?
It's a dessert. Fruit meat salad. Sounds wrong.
Oh, God. Don't make us mince food from
40s one more time. And the Sunkist salad bowl, which feels like the same.
Whoa. What was that filled with? It was a base of cream cheese. And then you top that off with wet orange. And then on top of that, you put the rinds. Salad.
And you cover it up with lettuce just so you don't have to look at it.
But like the lettuce that's barely not paper.
Under her recipes, there's a blurb that starts with the headline, "How oranges aid health." It also states that it has vitamin C, A, and B, and calcium contained. Also, Hitler's scared of them. I was just trying to think of how Americans would sell oranges. Hitler doesn't like them. You hate Hitler? Eat oranges. We're going to turn these into bullets. By the 30s, the naturalistic advertising of landscapes and healthy cherubs in overalls eating oranges was starting to phase out, and a new approach of commercial art was stepping in now that fruitcake labels were becoming less of a selling tool, less than billboards and magazine ads. After Francisco came the new Sunkist ad manager, William Gessinger, who started in 1925 and worked with Sunkist until like the mid-30s. They wanted to branch out and see their ads affect all types of Americans, from rural mountain people to busybody professors in New England. Gessinger relied heavily on statistics and surveys. Francisco had begun this in his campaign, but Gessinger literally went door to door inside homes and asked harder questions. From his assessments, which took years to collect an insane amount of data, they were able to drop things like demographics and age, if it was rural and urban. Apparently, 71% of the food dollar was spent by women. Urban dwellers, who made up 59% of the total population, spent 70% of the $9.7 billion on food every year. They were discovering how to implant the want for oranges still. Aside from continuing on radio and in magazines, they also began hitting up larger grocers, and by 1940, half of all stores retailing citrus displayed California oranges in their windows. Again, due to what the orange already symbolized, health and sunshine, the orange itself is a beautiful object, so of course it's display worthy.
Behold, I hold in my hands a noble orange. You're cute. I'm gonna call you a cutie.
Citrus fairs and orange shows have been popular since the early years of the 20th century, taking place in San Bernardino mostly, a little out of county, but what do you want? By the 30s, they became national orange shows, and their ads used some of the orange crate labels as posters for the events. In 1932, the show commemorated George Washington's 200th birthday, and they also celebrated...
Still alive and kicking.
They also celebrated the 32...
Because of oranges.
So it's keeping him alive, and he wants to be dead, but we won't let him.
No, and the nation needs him now more than ever.
They celebrated the 32 Olympic Games when they came to town, which is pretty cool. They had a big to do. It was part theme park, part trade show, part agricultural exposition, and part theater. There was fireworks and oranges, obviously. Thousands of people would come to these orange shows.
We forgot the oranges.
In the 40s, almost at the end of World War II, which was the second of the World Wars, the exchange was awarded...
Second of many to come.
The exchange was awarded with the War Food Administration's A, like the grade, A flag in recognition of outstanding achievements in the production of essential food. This was presented to the Exchange Orange Products Company, which dealt with the Sunkist Orange Products Division. Words. Sunkist was the first company in Southern California to get this, and the second in the state to receive this. This was like a big deal. By the 1950s, everything was starting to change. Chain supermarkets were taking over small grocers, and packing houses were being converted. For the containers for oranges were changing. The era of fruit crate labels ends in the 50s when cardboard replaces wood, as wood was too expensive. The cost of labor for assembling boxes rose, and cardboard containers were developed to withstand worse weather conditions. Paper labels and cardboard proved to not get along very well. The new cardboard boxes contained simple product identification designs pre-printed on the boxes already. That was the end of the era for fruit crate labels. In the 70 years that they existed, from 1880 to the late 50s, some 8,000 designs were created used on over 2 million boxes of oranges.
Ridiculous.
By the 50s, the end of the aggressive orange advertisements, or at least the golden age, was coming to an end. The reason was simple: they won. Los Angeles and Southern California were full of suburbs, and post-war Americans were just riddled with PTSD and civil rights violations. They were here. There was no more room to do oranges here. Now that people were here and realizing that, yes, this is the land of sunshine, but also of smog and traffic and people, in 1952, the California Fruit Growers Exchange officially changed their name to Sunkist. And they're headquartered in Sherman Oaks, the building you can see off of 101. Yeah! And for a company that created such beautiful imagery, that building is plenty boring.
I think it's nice.
It's okay.
It says Sunkist on it. I keep wanting to, I gotta get a picture of this for the podcast, but how
many accidents are you going to cause trying to do that?
How many more lives must be lost for Sunkist?
In the 60s, Sunkist began airing television commercials, but concentrated, pun intended, on lemons and lemons on black and white TVs. Okay. In 64 was when Oranges, the foundation of the company, got its own TV commercials, and the following year, 1965, they broadcast in new color televisions. A newspaper...
They could only get orange in the early days. We only said one color.
I want that blurry red orange. Newspaper coupons were beginning to be used more commonly in the late 60s, and Sunkist was all over that. Some landmarks through the last 60, 70 years. In 1977, the year disco and punk had America shouting, "Leave us alone." Sunkist licensed its trademark for the bottling and marketing of orange soda. Who trademarks orange soda?
Mel from marketing.
In 1990, Sunkist revenues topped the $1 billion mark in a single year, and 3 years later, Sunkist, formerly the Growers Exchange, is believed to be the first agricultural cooperative in the country to reach 100 years of consecutive service.
Wow.
They did it.
By
Son
God,
of a gun, they did it.
Son, S-U-N. Of a gun, G-O-N.
G-O-N.
There, I finally perfected it.
It took forever, Dan and Gene.
Dan and Jeans, that's me right now. You basically gave the gist of why there's no oranges anymore. Time to stretch it out over 20 minutes.
Do it.
Like for most of us in LA, death is a slow process with many causes.
The Sunset Boulevard.
To begin with, orange growing was never easy because nature itself was always trying to put an end to it.
Yeah.
Pests and disease were a constant threat. Even as far back as 1880, a bug called the cottony cushion scale.
You're crazy.
It's real.
That's my favorite band. That's my favorite blues band.
I love playing in the cottony cushion scale. This weird thing came to LA via San Francisco, via Australia, via New Zealand, and quickly there were millions of them that would suck the sap out of orange trees and led to what growers were calling the cottony plague, the hottest dance that season. Come on, do the Black Death.
It'll leave you dying. Do the ER mash.
Everybody bubonic. This was happening and they appealed to the USDA for help, so they sent a guy to the bug's homeland of New Zealand, and he came back with a bunch of Vidalia beetles, who are the natural predators of the cottony cushion scales. And this is how J.R.R. Tolkien got his start.
This is the worst New Zealand invasion
since the first one.
Yeah.
They brought these things, and when they were unleashed in 1888, it only took a few months for the whole plague to be cured. Like the beetles beetles
wow.
ate all of these bugs. But it wasn't always as easy as bringing a bunch of bugs from New Zealand to fix all of our problems again, especially since navel oranges slowly became the dominant orange, because normally when you grow things from seeds, there's a lot of diversity among the offspring. Everybody's different. Yeah. That's what everyone teaches me.
That's what I refuse to believe it.
Told repeatedly by my ACLU agent.
But I don't get how.
But since the navel was a seedless mutant, there was no...
that was rude.
Call the ACLU. I dare you. So there was no biodiversity amongst them. So if something hits that can kill one navel tree, it could kill all navel trees because they're all the same.
Yeah.
The trees have pretty much been faced with a constant bombardment of threats for decades. In the 50s, a virus known as tristeza, the most Italian of viruses, it threatened 70% of all orange trees in the state. In 1980, a medfly pest outbreak hit California, and helicopters, they had to fly over the groves in El Monte, Baldwin Park, West Covina, and Irwindale and just spray chemicals like Agent Orange.
Wow.
But literally, it killed it killed the pests, but these things would still come back every single year. So like life finds a way. In 2008, an infestation of Asian citrus facilid swept into the state, and the most infected part of LA was Echo Park, and they had to be sprayed down with chemicals. That was 2008. It's so bad that as of 2011, LA became one of the counties in Southern California whose citrus nursery stocks cannot leave the state. You can't do it. And any orange, they're like Chinese people trying to leave the country. Any orange fruit from here in general has to have all the leaves and stems removed before you can like take it across state lines. But that was just the bugs and diseases they had to deal with. The precious LA climate that had once been so good to the oranges started to turn against them also.
And all of us too. Don't forget the humans that live here.
Nah, I'm worried about the oranges.
I'm hanging 10
minutes to live. Oranges are very sensitive to the cold, so in winter, to keep them from dying, they developed these things called smudge pots. They were essentially heaters, but since oil was so plentiful in LA, these things ran off of just the grossest of oil, and in doing so, they blew this thick, dark smoke all over the orange groves. So during the day, the orange groves were this beautiful image of paradise that they were selling, and then at night, the night would fall and they turn into these like Mad Max death camps. Like it's really frightening to see, but people believed it was the smoke that was protecting the trees at night. So the smokier the better, even though it was leaving these black stains all over the fruit. The Growers Exchange started broadcasting on KNX 1070 News Radio in Los Angeles to give nightly forecasts of how dangerous it was going to be that night for oranges. In January 1922, it was so cold and there were so many smudge pots going that it created a black cloud over the coast so thick that they had to close San Pedro Bay because they couldn't get the lighthouse to burn bright enough to cut through the smoke. But it wasn't even just smoke. They called it smudge, which is not smog. Smudge is like thick smog. Like you could almost touch it. It's just like oil floating in the air.
Smudge?
What the smudge? Goober! You've been running the smudge pot all night. Gosh, shazam. So then again on Christmas Day 1924, there was so much smudge in the air in LA that it looked like an eclipse was happening. And not only did the port have to be shut down again, but a Pacific Electric rail car derailed and killed somebody because they couldn't see. They say
you're killing me, Larry.
This is the part of all of those orange crates that you don't see.
Why does this orange crate have a single upturned Pacific rail car?
So this Christmas Day 1924, they say this was a turning point in smudge pot use, but things still didn't change for quite a while. It wasn't until 1931 that a bill was passed to cut down on how much pollutants a smudge pot could give out, but still, it was a lot of pollutants. Yeah. Then in 1937, an 18-year-old orange worker, naranjeros as they were called, named Juan Velasquez, died in the valley when a smudge pot exploded onto him, and that year they set up stricter anti-smudge ordinances, but they still kept using them, and they were so bad for the environment. Like people, they would have to cover up their furniture to keep smudge from getting all over it, and windows had to be constantly cleaned. Some schools, they couldn't even open until the smudge was cleaned out of them and it was safe for kids to come in.
Industry.
Big business.
Big business.
LA, clean air, smudge. The smudge monster.
What do you want, smudge or smog? Well, we got both, so.
You can't choose. During World War II, smudge pots, that second one, smudge pots were even encouraged because during the air raid blackouts, they hoped that the smudge fires would confuse any Japanese planes and make them think they were factories instead of orange groves and attack there instead. instead.
They just feel sad for us. That's all. Like, oh my God, what have they done?
By 1947, smudge pots were mostly outlawed, so they started moving towards things like big fans to blow the frost off of the groves at night. But by then, the oranges had a new threat to face in the form of car pollution, like you said. The most immediate reason that the oranges are now gone is, again, like you said, the development boom of LA post-World War II. All those marketing campaigns to get people to move to California, to Orange Paradise, worked a little bit too well. Between 1940 to 1950, the population in California went from 6.9 to 10.6 million people, and many of those came right here to Los Angeles. Housing became more profitable than orange growing, so all these groves had to be raised to make room for all the new residents. As the city got urbanized, orange production fled up north to the San Joaquin Valley, where good old farmland was still welcomed. LA collapsed first, and then it spread south through the Orange Curtain, as they called it, into Orange County, and then through Riverside and San Bernardino. But the thing is, things have been slowly getting worse and worse for so long that a lot of the growers welcome the suburbanization just so they could cash out of this. Like, I just want to float on a cloud of smudge.
I just want to eat apples.
Suddenly, I don't like them. Did I ever mention I'm allergic? The great age of the orange was really between 1890 to about 1950. Like, that was when orange was the thing. It was said during the 1930s and 40s that driving through Southern California, you could smell the orange blossoms for 100 miles away, and you could taste the smudge for 200. Comedian Fred Allen said that California is a fine place to live if you happen to be an orange.
It's funny.
Humor. When will it develop?
I thought Rod Serling said something like that. LA was a great place to live if you're a grapefruit.
But it turns out the grapefruit was a doll.
He was the grapefruit all along.
Again, listen to This Is Rad. We talk about Twilight Zone. In 1920, the Fruit Growers Exchange was making about, it was still called that at the time, they were making about $100 million a year in sales. Throughout the decade, orange growing was second in profit only to oil in California. This is why during that decade, things like the Orange Julius were invented. Listen to our City Bites episode. Between those ever-present world wars, citrus made more money in LA than airplanes and filmmaking combined. Like those two businesses.
Crazy.
Yeah, in 1924, there were over 52,000 acres of oranges in LA County, sending out 20 million boxes a year. The peak seems to have been in 1945 with 350,000 acres in California, but by 1956, that number was already down to 250,000. The U.S. now grows over 25 billion oranges a year, and California still takes in about 1 billion a year from oranges, but we're still second to Florida these days. Way back when, Saunders from the USDA, our old friend from Riverside, well, our old friend from Riverside had sent some navel samples to Florida as well, but it didn't take in that climate, so Florida is still mostly Valencias, while California is mostly navels. It's also important to realize that lemons and grapefruits were a big part of this as well, but the marketing on oranges was so good that they're all people really focus on. Sunkist takes in about $1 billion a year, and they now do things like soda and candy, but they're still a cooperative of sorts with thousands of members in California and Arizona. They moved their headquarters in 2014 to Valencia, but their old building, which was opened in 1971 at 14130 Riverside Drive in Sherman Oaks, it's still there. It has their name on it. It's beautiful, despite what Greg said. A company called IMT Residential is now planning to preserve this building while also turning it into a sustainable living complex and using the building itself as offices and retail stores, so you can live there one day maybe.
God willing.
God willing, I can live in an orange factory. Most oranges left in LA are just in people's backyards, but there's still a grove at the Huntington Botanical Gardens next to Huntington's Mausoleum, but the biggest one is right here at California State University, Northridge.
Yay!
The valley was a huge part of the orange industry, especially once the Owens Valley Aqueduct opened in 1913. In the 1920s, land in San Fernando, which was very close to the aqueduct and a slightly higher elevation, land there was going for up to $5,000 an acre, which was 8 times as much as land in other areas. The 1930s was really the peak in the valley, with some 15,000 acres, mostly Valencias, and with so many packing houses here, almost 500 rail cars a year were being sent out just from valley produce. But the valley was hit hard by suburbanization. By the early 1970s, there were only 350 acres of oranges left there. By the 90s, there were only about 40 acres left. What's left there now is concentrated on the CSUN campus, which has been protected by the Associated Student Union since 1972. They apparently weren't that great at protecting it because it has shrunk over the years. In the 90s, they had 500 trees over 7 acres, but new parking lots were put in and the Valley Performing Arts Center. So today there are about 400 100 trees over 5 acres. Some of the trees are as old as 1952, and the school perpetually wants to tear them down to put more things on top of it. Sunkist Growers has donated 150 trees to help replace some of their dying ones. The fruit's free to pick if you want, although they are disgusting. Charities like the Institute for Sustainability and Food Forward go there about twice a year to pick fruit to donate to local food banks, and they end up getting some 15,000 pounds of them, so go get some for yourself to deprive from people who actually need it.
They all have scurvy. Did we mention that? It's bizarre. I feel like so many times we come across something that's like, yeah, it brought all the people here. It wasn't even the movie industry, and just people want to come to California.
Yeah, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You guys have mailboxes? We'll be there.
Dragon Parade. I want to come. The other day, I was thinking about conversations we were having before we started this, and one of them was that people would complain that we have no culture here in Los Angeles, and like every episode, I'm like, that's not true.
How about citriculture?
Yeah. Constantly things that are coming out of California, like the first time that's happened.
It's so weird. Like every single thing we try to tackle, it's like, well, this was the first ever.
Yeah, it's very odd.
It's again like one of those things, like the rail car, the Pacific Electric, and all that was like such a huge part of the city, and is now gone.
Yeah,
the city is completely turned
raised.
over.
Yeah,
there was a purge.
Everything's turning into parking lots or bullets.
It's all just parking lots and poke restaurants now. Doing the research on this one, like I was like at work reading about oranges, and then getting so like about to pass out. Like I gotta get home and eat an orange. I was like the Godfather.
I was looking at all these orange crate labels and like, there has to be a grove I could drive, and then this was the only one. And I was like, there has to be a grove I could drive by or something.
We went to pick some to try to see like, well, we gotta taste the history. I could barely even lick it.
Well, they looked orange in the sun, and then we took them out and they were yellow and they were bruised, and then you licked one and you're even holding it like, this isn't right. There's something wrong with this. I'm gonna start eating my orange that you brought me. You brought me a cutie.
Cutie for a cutie.
Stop.
Get out of here. Get out of here. 2 out of the last 3 episodes ends with you eating whatever we were talking about. Yeah, you ate a witch in the last episode.
Eat oranges. Be part of the American culture. Southern California culture, excuse me, more specifically.
Taste the rainbow.
Oh, no, wait, that's the wrong one. Skittle culture of Southern California. It is odd to think that so much of the push was created by a company, and that's what happens. And it was, early 20th century, and you always think like, oh, that might happen much later in that century. No, it was pretty early. But like it wasn't the worst thing ever. It was for a fruit and not like heroin. Come buy some. It was for a really
sunny
good fruit.
California heroin. I'm eating my orange also.
Okay. Yeah, but like these images were created that are like the fruit crate labels are collector items now if you could find them, because
they're really nice.
Yeah,
like,
they're beautiful.
They really are very nice.
Yeah, in trying to come up with logos for our thing, I was looking at fruit crate labels for such a long time, and I was like, I could draw one. Those are beautiful landscapes. I can draw one.
Do you think you are Don Francisco? Olay.
What do you think, Father Francisco?
I was very surprised that Sunkist started, because I'd always seen the Sunkist thing, but I had no idea like, oh, it started here.
I always thought of it as like a sugar-coated like fruit candies and soda, and I was like, oh, that's all they do. I forgot like, oh yeah, real oranges, and like they've been working as this other group since like the late 19th century, and they did everything, and they got Myrna Loy to put an ad out in the paper. Poor Myrna Loy.
If you'd like to make us as famous as Myrna Loy, go on iTunes and leave us. Greg's doing the Godfather to me. I could have been a contender
for your father. Wait, what are you gonna say?
Leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. It helps us out a lot, makes it easier for people to find us, new listeners. If you have an iPhone, it's as easy as going to your podcast app, putting in LA Meekly. You're already logged in. Boom, 5 stars. Boom, boom, boom,
boom, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom. You can find us on Facebook, LA Meekly. You can find us on Instagram, LA_Meekly.
We put pictures every day. You'll see some orange pictures from the Seasung Grove, and me moments before a fatal car crash taking a picture of the Sunkist thing from the 101.
Twitter at LA Meekly. You can email us, la.meekly@gmail.com. We are doing field trip episodes, so if you have...
Which will be coming out soon.
Very soon, we promise.
If you work at a place of historical significance or cultural significance in Los Angeles and you'd like us to come visit with comp tickets, and we'll interview
on the spot, and we will release that as a quick episode. It's something we're trying to do more often.
Go to our main hub,
lameekly.tumblr.com.
lameekly.tumblr.com. lameekly.tumblr.com. I tried to cover up for Greg's disgusting eating habits, and then I fumbled over
spit
myself.
all over my lap trying to say it. Thanks. Again, you can catch us on This Is Rad.
It's fun. It was a fun
part of their
episode.
Radtober, I believe it's called.
Which is now Radvember. I want to thank Chris Jepson from the Orange County Archives, because we met him at the Archives Bazaar, and I sent him an email with some questions, and he helped out. And also David Boulay, author of The Orange and the Dream of California. I emailed him. We also met him.
Yeah.
He answered some questions, and the book's really good.
Yeah,
it's like easy to read. It's like a fun textbook, which is a weird thing to say, but it's like a good
When I say that there's a
textbook.
lot of great pictures, I don't mean that it's only pictures, but the pictures are so appealing, and you're like, oh yeah, and it isn't a task to read it. It's very enjoyable.
Put that on the back cover. It isn't a task to read this. Two hosts of a thing no one likes. Any last words?
No.
Well then.
Thank you everyone for listening. I hope to see you next month. It's going to be our creepy Christmas again.
Exciting.
Very excited to figure out what we're going to talk about because we
I
have
thought
no
this
idea.
was the scary one.
Oh no. Oh no. The smudge. The smudge is here. Smudge monster.
New intro. An outro. We can start doing outros.
I'll do an outro. It'll just take 6 hours to write it after an 8-hour work day, and no one will like them.
That's perfect.
It's perfect. A little bit different, but it's perfect.
All right. Well, that's enough of this. We've put you through enough.
I'm so sorry. Good night.
That has been yet another episode of L.A. Meekly sucking down smudge since 2013.
Boo. Stop.